SoCal Connected is made possible through the generous support of the Amundsen Foundation, serving the Los Angeles community since 1952. On tonight's SoCal Connected, who approved that?
I used to be able to see the sunsets. I used to be able to get sun into my backyard. I've lost the use of my backyard.
Does affordable housing mean the end of the single-family home?
So if the middle class can't afford to live in the city, ultimately the city loses out and becomes a shell of what a diverse city should be.
How does a beloved pet wind up in doggy jail?
I had no idea if she was going to get taken away from us, if she was going to get put down.
We go inside a place where dogs are guilty until proven innocent.
This is the most urgent problem facing humanity.
Everyone talks about climate change. This family is doing something about it.
I don't want a world like the one that scientists are predicting.
Hello, I'm Val Zavala. If you live or work in Los Angeles, you've probably asked yourself, who approved that? Retail and housing developments are popping up all across the city every week, and many of them pit old neighborhoods against the future of LA, which will look very different. It could be the single-family home is an endangered species.
Steve Windmiller says he has no problem with more apartments in Los Angeles. He just doesn't want them all built right in his backyard. For decades, he's lived in this close-knit Westchester suburb of single-family homes, built just after World War II. Now, a new neighbor has changed everything. This development has literally stolen the sunshine and much of what Steve and his neighbors once loved about living here.
I used to be able to see the sunsets. I used to be able to get sun into my backyard by my pool. I've lost the use of my backyard. People all the time stop and look at it, and they ask me, they say, what is that? How did that get there?
I'm practicing anger management techniques daily. And I joke about that, but yeah, it's stress.
These neighbors used to live next to a church and a school campus. Now it's a 100-unit apartment building, and it keeps going up and up and up, 5 stories high. So just how did this happen?
I don't know if it was backroom deals, but it was kind of just a check, check, check. You went through the process. Okay, yeah, you're approved.
The approval process starts at the City Planning Department, which oversees zoning rules. Then it heads to the Planning Commission. But the City Council and the mayor have final say. Now, more and more LA residents are asking, who approved that? As small family homes give way to massive apartment buildings.
And they said they would be there for us. They weren't. Why do we have people that represent us that have no say, that can't fight for us, that can't do anything for us?
Westchester isn't the only area where giant buildings are dwarfing neighborhoods. Some parts of LA look just like a scene from the movie Up. And homeowners aren't the only ones who are voicing discontent with LA's vertical creep.
It's a little disconcerting to feel occupied.
Renters like these, who live in Hollywood's Yucca Argyle apartments near the Capitol Records building, are fighting plans to tear down their rent-controlled apartments.
Why are we driving out people that help build the community in the name of, urban renewal?
People are leaving California. People are leaving LA because they can't afford it. And it's because of these developments.
The day after our interview, the developer sent them a notice saying their buildings would be razed, but that current tenants would also be guaranteed comparable rent-controlled apartments in a new building. Still, they say it's a huge loss.
This is
Classic Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yep, classic Hollywood.
And they want it to be what's behind us here.
And then this one over here. And over here, you're going to see another high-rise, it looks like.
Yes. They're slowly sort of erasing, a lot of the historic quality and the things about Hollywood that make it unique.
We've worked with a lot of garden apartment complexes, with bungalow courts, is some of these are designed to really promote community. And that's something that I don't know that people think about as much now.
Most everyone we talk to agrees it's time to put the planning back into city planning in LA. But preserving the past while moving into the future won't be easy.
We have a political process and a planning process that was created in the early 20th century. I think that the process actually is largely outdated and isn't as fast, isn't as creative as what we need to really address the underlying problems facing the city.
Mike Wu is a former LA City Council member and a past president of the Planning Commission. Now he inspires students to innovate as the Dean of Environmental Design at Cal Poly Pomona.
If a city allows affordable units to be lost, it really transforms what a city is like. The middle classes really add a lot to the stability of a city. And so if the middle class can't afford to live in the city, ultimately the city loses out and becomes a shell of what a diverse, heterogeneous city should be.
Many neighborhood groups voicing opposition to large developments next to their homes are frustrated by changes they say are indiscriminate and poorly planned. Critics call them NIMBYs, short for not in my backyard. Now there's a generation of residents, those who shout, yes in my backyard, or YIMBYs, who enthusiastically push for more housing, even if that means high-rises in single-family neighborhoods.
I'm not trying to tell you that you can't live in a house. I'm just asking you not to tell me that I can't live in an apartment.
YIMBYs tend to be millennials who rent rather than own, and they're hungry for housing near metro stops, restaurants, and businesses.
You want to put housing in places where people can live without cars, and it's easier for them to get around.
A new planning project called Recode LA is already working to overhaul LA's zoning codes. They're holding hearings like this one near the Wilshire corridor to consider new housing zones along transit lines. Most of the people we met here, including local homeowners, support more high-density housing.
We look at as many strategies as we can. This is the stage where we like to hear from the communities, and their input is very valuable to our process.
I'm all for having denser housing along Wilshire, as close to the purple line as you can get. I want more towers around Wilshire. There's a lot of parking lots that could be redeveloped, a lot of single-use, really low-rise buildings could be redeveloped.
At UCLA's City Lab, Professor Kevin Daly has asked students to design creative ways to increase housing.
City Lab recognized that there was another solution, which is building additional units in existing single-family house backyards.
The extra housing, they say, could boost available units without dominating neighborhoods.
Every single person you talk to has a slightly different narrative. They want to rent it. They have a kid who's moving back. They are getting older. They want to move into it and rent their house. And so there's a huge range of scenarios.
UCLA's City Lab also helped pass statewide legislation easing restrictions on backyard units. YIMBYs applaud that approach.
I think there are currently too many restrictions on the types of projects we build. We want mixed income neighborhoods, not neighborhoods just for the rich.
But whether any of this would provide affordable housing, LA's biggest challenge, is still up for debate. It seems where there's a solution, there's also another problem.
When there's a big housing shortage, what happens is people build housing and they build the most expensive housing they can build.
And that in turn often accelerates unwelcome changes to the city's long-standing neighborhoods.
People are starting to really care about their historic resources, and they want a way to save them.
LA's Koreatown is one neighborhood where discontent has leaked into the political and social climate.
We want to be able to keep a little bit of our history, be it Boyle Heights, be it Chinatown. When you have residents who are no longer able to stay where they've grown up, it is causing great consternation to not just the individual, but entire ripples of communities.
In a shocker, Koreatown elected outsider David Rue to the LA City Council in 2015. He won on a wave of anti-development sentiments. A survey by the LA Times found that despite pushback from residents, city officials approved 90% of zoning changes requested by developers citywide during the past 17 years. The Westchester residents outraged by the high-rise apartments in their backyard are also becoming increasingly political, supporting a recall campaign to oust their city councilman, Mike Bonin.
After over a year or more of talking with city people, meeting with Councilman Mike Bonin and stuff like that, we've just found out that they don't really support us.
But Bonin represents not just Westchester. He also oversees other areas of West Los Angeles now undergoing rapid growth, including Playa Vista's Silicon Beach and other coastal communities where housing shortages are highest. And the growth of tech and innovation industries now happening here only worsens housing shortages.
It's creating demand for housing from workers who want to not have to commute a long distance, and that results in the development pressure.
Do you think that that's a pressure to kind of create this housing in that area?
This is not a surprise. Nobody should be surprised this happened.
It's also pressure that continues to boost housing prices, building heights, and even developments near freeways where pollution levels are high. These units, like those in nearby Westchester, are built for the huge influx of tech employees working nearby.
There's a real recognition that we're a growing city, and we have to continue to find ways to accommodate the population.
Signaling that suburban sprawl of yesterday is giving way to growth in an entirely different direction.
Our pets can be our soulmates, but what happens when a terrier becomes a terror, a poodle becomes a problem, or a bulldog bites someone? How are these doggy disputes resolved? Over the past couple months, we got rare access into what can only be called animal court.
We would never think that our dogs could be labeled a menace to society, but
animal control knocked on my door. Like, does a little black dog live here?
That's how Angela Gullner found out her dog was in trouble for biting a neighbor, and how she got snared in a legal system she never knew existed.
And apparently this person had called animal control and had reported the incident, and that started the whole thing. She's just a little clown.
At this point, Angela had no idea what was going to be in store for her or her 8-year-old blind bulldog, Bina.
I had no idea if she was going to get taken away from us, if she was going to get put down, if we were going to have to pay a big fine. He said an incident had been filed against her. We had to take a mugshot of my blind dog, so I was holding her up and her eyes were in different directions.
What Angela is describing is the first step of ending up here, the headquarters of the Los Angeles Department of Animal Services, where doggy drama is on full display. You could call it animal court, a process so few know about that SoCal connected cameras are the first allowed inside. This is where some dogs, or at least their owners, end up making their case. Anything can land a dog in animal court. Barking, biting, lunging, or in Bina's case, just the mere accusation.
My dog was inside our house and he claimed that she had bit her. Now, I never saw her bite anyone. I never saw her leave the house. She doesn't have hands, so she can't open the door herself.
The only purpose of this hearing is to determine if there's a safety issue concerning dogs in the city of LA.
These legal proceedings aren't trials, but witnesses are called, lawyers are hired, and evidence is presented, sometimes pitting neighbor against neighbor.
We had an incident and like your dogs were out, they attacked our dogs, and like honestly, I just think it's in your best interest to say, gosh, I'm sorry.
I already did. I
no,
believe I did.
No, you didn't.
Okay, well, even a routine morning walk can land you here. This case took place in Glassell Park, where 2 little dogs were attacked.
Went behind me and they were on leashes and they were, yelping and crying, and essentially they were growling and barking at him, and eventually got him off him. I got knocked down and kicked him away and punched him. And
they're timid around other dogs in the first place.
Other dogs.
No, it's like our sweet little dogs, and they were terrified. And then
It didn't happen at the park?
No, it was on the corner. He got knocked into Eagle Rock Boulevard.
Okay, I think
let's go back this way.
Okay.
Because otherwise we're just going to turn into
crosstalk.
These cases remind us that just because a dog is cute, that doesn't mean it can't be accused of being dangerous.
So this is your bulldog, right?
Yes.
He looks like a big panda bear.
Yeah, he is. He's like a big teddy bear.
Okay, so
What is his name?
Chucky.
And sometimes it's not just the dogs getting attacked.
But I think she's my neighbor, and you know me, I wouldn't do that to my neighbor, or I wouldn't do that to anyone's dog. So I think basically she didn't show up. I don't think she was being truthful.
Instances like this are what some describe as neighbors weaponizing the law.
Unfortunately, LA Animal Services has allowed itself to be weaponized, and same with the dangerous dog ordinance to a certain, Also, hearings are really not about dogs, but about neighbors who don't like each other.
Captain Troy Boswell is one of 2 hearing examiners in the department.
All right, because I have photographs and I get an idea of what's
Here's the large.
This is just one of hundreds of cases Boswell and Captain Danny Pantoja hear every year.
The dog to be a chow mix named Fluffy, who is currently in license and current rabies, and a Labrador mix named Boo Boo.
Together, they hear 4 cases a day, and they've seen it all, from poodles to pit bulls.
Minor injuries to severity injuries. These incidents all could be avoided if people would properly control their dogs.
And Captain Boswell says he's seen his share of breakdowns, meltdowns, fights, and like in this case, tears.
She pretty much kind of bled out on the grass, and I tried to take her to the emergency room, and there was no saving her, so she passed away.
Shannon and her dog were attacked. Her dog died in her arms. What happens next to the other dog is now up to the evidence.
Fortunately, I don't make the decision, I make a recommendation.
If the accused does not agree, they can appeal to the Board of Animal Services Commission. SoCal Connected looked at cases where dogs are accused of biting other dogs, biting children, and yes, even biting the mailman. Many are confined to the owner's property for public health and safety reasons. Angela couldn't take Bina anywhere for 2 weeks.
She couldn't leave the premises, which was really obnoxious because she slowed down a little bit now that she's older, but she was really active and she lives for her walks, and so it was really hard to keep her inside or just to this back area for 2 weeks. She started to go a little bit stir crazy.
Dogs can be confined until their cases are heard, sometimes taking up to a year. That means no walks, no playdates, not even a vet visit without permission from the department.
How many cases are in here?
I couldn't honestly tell you. I mean, we're doing 2 a day every day.
Well, 2 a day, just you.
Just me. My partner does 2 a day also, so, do the math.
As a result of policy changes, the department is overwhelmed with hearings. There are currently 395 cases waiting to be heard, and just Pantoja and Boswell to do them all.
And it often happens where we get a whole spurt of animal impounds by the shelter, so suddenly we get cases backed up even further. We find ourselves sometimes 8, 10, 12 months behind.
In more serious cases, dogs can end up in doggy jail, also known as the animal shelter.
The area is past this gate, so you couldn't even go past that area. They all look like this. No one can go past this small gate here. Okay. They're all over there.
Behind this gate is where you keep all the dogs that are impounded waiting for hearings.
Yeah, either waiting for hearings or waiting for the owners to be able to come up with the money to come get their dog too.
How many dogs do you have here that are currently impounded?
Let's see, I think here we have maybe 12.
When we visited, there were 34 dogs in shelters across Los Angeles waiting for hearings to decide their fate. But defense attorneys say this is a guilty until proven innocent system.
It's really unfair. I mean, the sad thing is there's just not even a pretense of due process.
Instead of hearings, residents and lawyers say it could be as simple as keeping your dog on a leash.
Where's LA Animal Services? Why aren't they issuing citations? This is what they should be doing. Finding a person with an off-leash dog is like shooting fish in a barrel in LA. I think that would go a long way to getting people to be more responsible and keep their dogs on leash.
As for Angela, the case was dismissed because the man claiming Bina bit him never showed up.
She's a free dog.
Even though the process is over, there can be lasting impacts.
It was all really unnerving and really strange. And then I have been worried that I'm going to see him on the street. It did feel a little bit like a betrayal, or like my character was being sort of skewered a little bit.
And sometimes a simple apology is all that's really needed.
I don't know, just an apology would be a human thing to do,
It's okay, we apologize that our dogs harmed you, and it won't happen again.
Okay, thank you.
We all try to be green. We turn off the lights, recycle, go solar. But how many of us could cut our energy usage by 90%? Well, I found one family in Altadena who has done just that. It's fill-up time for Peter Kalmus. No gas stations for him. His 1984 Mercedes runs on used vegetable oil that he gets free from a sushi restaurant.
This jug will get us about 120 miles.
The biodiesel engine runs on biofuel, not fossil fuel. So this is not contributing to CO2.
No, it's a waste product. It's not contributing to climate change. Because it's a waste product and it's coming from the atmosphere and then it's going back in the atmosphere.
This is important to Peter. You see, he's an atmospheric scientist, an expert on climate change and global warming.
Why isn't society doing more about this? This is the most urgent problem facing humanity.
About 10 years ago, he realized he couldn't just study climate change, he had to change the way he lived. Peter lives in a modest home in Altadena, along with his wife Sharon, his 2 boys, Braird and Zane, and their dog Mitzi.
In terms of win-loss record.
They have achieved something remarkable. They have reduced their energy use by 90%, and along with it, their contribution to climate change.
90%, yeah. So from about 20 metric tons of CO2 per year, which is very close to the US average, down to a little under 2 metric tons per year.
How did they do it?
Sometimes it takes a couple tries.
A lot of ways, big and small.
There we got it. This is the compost bin.
They compost their garbage that would normally go to landfills and produce harmful methane. They use a closed line instead of a closed dryer. Peter bikes to work, to the nearby Jet Propulsion Lab. These steps aren't that unusual.
I have a bill from 2015 if you want it.
What's unusual is how precisely Peter has calculated his carbon footprint. Then again, he's a climate scientist.
So I sat down and kind of did a couple hours of internet research and figured out how much does my natural gas usage contribute, how much does my diet contribute, driving, flying, electricity, buying new stuff.
And when the calculations were finished, he got a big surprise.
Beforehand, I was thinking electricity would be my big thing and I needed to put solar panels up. What I found instead was that flying was by far my biggest source of emissions. So anything else I did to reduce, it would basically be meaningless unless I reduced my flying.
He was flying about 50,000 miles a year, mainly to conferences. So he convinced his bosses to let him go to those conferences he could drive to. By not flying, he cut his personal carbon footprint by a whopping 70%.
It is a bit of a handicap not to be able to go to conferences and collaboration meetings, but it's a trade-off that I'm making very consciously, and I think it's, I think it'll work out in the end.
I think that Peter and I definitely come from a similar point of view.
For Sharon, the no-fly rule is a bigger challenge.
But I'm kind of in an earlier stage in my career and sort of need to be able to attend conferences and job interviews and that kind of thing.
And how about vacations? For that, they take the train or the biodiesel veggie vehicle.
Left hand's up here. Sometimes I feel like your friends who are doing this great thing or buying this condo or going there and flying everywhere. We didn't move into a bigger house in our 40s the way that our friends did. We didn't get to do this great vacation. It's almost like a discipline, right, that consumer culture is constantly exerting on us to want to consume more and do more. And it's nonsense, right? Because that stuff is not intrinsically fulfilling and it's not intrinsically meaningful.
Sound makes.
Okay, flying was number 1. So what was their second biggest source of emissions?
It was food, and that was a surprise to me. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
Their meat-based diet accounted for 13% of their emissions, so they became vegetarians and cut that percentage in half. They have a big avocado tree in the backyard, along with half a dozen other fruit trees, and they have chickens. But then Peter went even further and started what's called dumpster diving.
So the first time I did it, the first couple times I did it, I actually went into dumpsters with some friends who do that. It was a lot of fun, actually. It's amazing how clean it is, how good the food is. Certainly the supermarkets don't encourage people to do that, which made it all the more fun because it felt kind of subversive.
Now you may be wondering, where are the solar panels? Well, the Kalmus family only uses 12% of the electricity of an average family, just 12%. So solar power didn't make economic sense.
I estimated the payback time for us, and it was on the order of 30 years. Oh. Yeah, and it would have been a huge upfront cost.
But when it came to not using the clothes dryer, that required a little bargain.
I put the laundry in and he hangs it out. He puts it on the line. I bring it in, though, and sort it into piles for the kids.
So how about the kids? Well, they love having chickens.
And we also have this giant, beautiful garden, and I really enjoy gardening.
Bird knows a lot more about climate change than most kids his age. Sometimes he's a little afraid of the future, but then living this way helps.
I enjoy being able to feel like I'm not using affecting climate change because I don't want a world like the one that scientists are predicting what's going to happen in the future. I don't want a world like that. I'm definitely lucky. I know about climate change. I can try to stop it. I think that's lucky. And I have the resources to try to stop it.
She's a great soul.
Peter has put all he's learned, the science, the family's energy savings, and his philosophy, in a book. It's called Being the Change.
A huge change for me was having kids. And because of my love for them and because of my love for the rest of this planet, I realized that I also had to speak out as much as I could, even though that was really scary for me. I'd much rather just do science and kind of write papers and live a quiet life. But I feel like I just don't have that option because this is happening so fast. I can say with a lot of confidence that this is happening faster. It's much more urgent. It's much more serious. The effects are going to last much longer than the public realizes.
Despite the dire warning, one thing Peter and Sharon know, they're happier living this way.
I think you just have to be willing to go against the dominant culture and make that rewarding, that that's awesome, and that that should be something that really, it's a kind of an implicit reward.
Imagine humanity kind of as a member of the web of life. Are we kind of the end-all and be-all of evolution? Are we kind of better than all these other animals? Or are we kind of sharing this biosphere with them? And are we like kind of one species among many?
Pin catcher with the fence. It's easy.
I got you.
Then changing your own life to live with less fossil fuels, I'm sure it'll make you happier.
And that's our program for this evening. Don't forget you can see all of our stories online at kcet.org. I'm Val Zavala. Thanks for watching.